The sound of the post-hole digger biting into the rich, dark earth of my family's land was a deeply satisfying rhythm, a punctuation mark at the end of a long and increasingly frustrating sentence. Thump-chunk. Thump-chump. The heavy steel blades plunged into the soil, severing roots and scattering stones, and with each plunge, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my family's peace. I was drawing a line not in the sand, but in the soil itself, a line that had been willfully and arrogantly ignored for far too long. I wrestled the first of 2 heavy 10-foot cedar posts into the 4-foot hole I'd dug, its base settling firmly against the packed earth. This was the head of the trail, the exact spot where my property began and the manicured, artificial world of the Sunset Cove estates ended. The trail itself was a thing of subtle beauty, a narrow footpath worn into the land over a century of quiet use by my family. It meandered from the edge of my modest lawn, through a cathedral-like stand of old-growth pines, and emerged at a rocky overlook with a breathtaking panoramic view of Whisper Lake. My grandfather and his father before him had maintained this path, trimming back the wild ferns in the spring, clearing fallen limbs after a storm. It was a place of quiet contemplation, a private artery that connected my historic cabin to the wild, beating heart of the lake. And for the last 6 months, it had been treated like a public highway, a noisy, litter-strewn thoroughfare for the entitled residents of the new development. I was just stretching a heavy, rust-colored chain between the 2 newly set posts when her voice sliced through the tranquil afternoon, a sound as pleasant as a fork scraping across a dinner plate. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" I didn't have to look. The voice was unmistakable, a reedy, imperious sound that always seemed to carry a note of simmering outrage, as if the world was constantly failing to meet her exacting standards. It was Cynthia Porter, the president of the Sunset Cove Homeowners Association. I finished securing the heavy chain to a thick eye-bolt and turned slowly to face her. She was standing on her side of the invisible property line, her hands planted firmly on her hips, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She was dressed in a pristine white tennis outfit that looked like it had been surgically attached, though I knew for a fact the community's much-vaunted courts hadn't even broken ground yet. "Good afternoon, Cynthia," I said calmly, pulling off my leather work gloves and wiping the sweat from my brow with the back of my hand. "Don't you that afternoon me, Daniel?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You can't do this. This is our trail. This is the Sunset Cove Wellness Path. The residents use this trail every single day." "I'm painfully aware of that, Cynthia," I said, my voice still even. "That's precisely the problem. This trail, as you call it, is the central path on my private property. And I am, as is my legal right, closing it to public access." "You have no right," she shrieked, taking a step forward, her pristine white sneakers hesitating at the edge of my unkempt natural grass. "This is a historic right-of-way. The developer told us this trail was a community amenity. It's in our marketing brochures." This was the core of our dispute, the foundational lie that had festered for months. When the developers of Sunset Cove bought the adjacent farmland, they had marketed their expensive lots with the promise of a charming rustic walking trail and exclusive lake access. They had simply pointed to my family's path and sold it as part of their lifestyle package, conveniently neglecting to mention that they didn't own it, and that the only thing they could guarantee was a view of it from a distance. My cabin had been in my family since 1919. I was a historical archivist by profession, and this place wasn't just a vacation home to me. It was a living document, a tangible connection to my ancestors. I had inherited it from my grandfather, a man who had served as the county record keeper for 40 years. He loved this land with a quiet, fierce passion and taught me to read its history not just in books, but in the old stone walls, the ancient trees, and the faded, elegant ink of old plat maps.
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Trees and the faded, elegant ink of old plat maps. This land had a story, and I was its steward. At first, the trespassing from the new development had been minor. The couple might wander up the path, admire the view, and leave quietly. I was raised to be a good neighbour, so I let it be. But then, as more houses were completed, the incursions grew more brazen. Large groups from Sunset Cove started treating the overlook as their personal party deck, leaving behind a disgusting trail of wine bottles, snack wrappers, and cigarette butts. Teenagers would sneak down at night, leaving beer cans and the charred remains of fire pits dangerously close to the dry pines. The final straw had come last weekend, when I'd gone down to the overlook to watch the sunrise, and had found a still smouldering campfire and several of my grandmother's native orchids trampled underfoot. My first attempt at a solution had been subtle. I put up a small, professionally made sign at the trailhead. It was carved from a piece of handsome oak and read, in polite script, "Private property. Please be respectful of the land." It was torn down within a week, the post snapped in two. My second attempt had been more direct. I saw Cynthia at the local post office and approached her politely. I explained that while I didn't mind an occasional quiet walker, the increased traffic was causing significant damage and major liability concerns for me as the landowner. Her response had been a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, don't be so territorial, Daniel," she'd said with a condescending smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Land this beautiful is meant to be shared. It's selfish to keep it all to yourself. That's not how we do things in a modern, forward-thinking community like Sunset Cove." Actually, I had corrected her, my own politeness wearing thin. My family has been practicing conservation and stewardship on this land since before this county was even officially incorporated. What your residents are doing isn't sharing, it's consumption. And it's ending. The trail is a private footpath on my family's land, and it has been for over 100 years. She had simply laughed, a short, sharp, dismissive sound. "You can't prove that. It's a trail. Trails are for walking. We'll see you on the trail." That conversation had been the final straw. She had mistaken my patience for weakness. She had confused my desire for neighbourly peace with a lack of resolve. So now, here we were, at the physical manifestation of my resolve. 2 thick cedar posts, a heavy chain, and a brand new sign. I hung the sign I'd had made from the centre of the chain. It was larger, made of powder-coated metal, and the words were less ambiguous, altered directly to the plate. "Private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted under state law." Cynthia stared at the sign, her face turning a shade of crimson that clashed horribly with her white outfit. "I cannot believe the audacity," she sputtered. "You are illegally blocking a public right-of-way. You are creating a public nuisance. This is a direct violation of our community's spirit and our residents' expectations." "This isn't your community, Cynthia," I said, my voice hardening. "This is my home. And your residents have proven themselves incapable of being respectful guests, so their implied invitation has been permanently and formally revoked." Her eyes narrowed to slits. She was a woman accustomed to getting her way through sheer force of will, and my calm, unyielding refusal to bend was causing her to short-circuit. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her thumb stabbing at the screen with furious jabs. "We'll see about that," she spat. "You think you can just cut off access to a beloved community feature with a cheap sign and some chain? I am calling the authorities to have this illegal barrier removed. I am calling 911 right now." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply leaned against one of my sturdy new fence posts, crossed my arms, and waited. The quiet hum of the forest, the distant call of a loon on the lake, these were the sounds of my home. Her shrill, angry voice, feeding a dramatic and one-sided story to the 911 dispatcher, was just noise. A temporary disruption to a peace that I was, finally, and irrevocably, taking back. The county sheriff's vehicle arrived about 20 minutes later, its tires crunching slowly on the gravel of the main road before pulling to a stop near the disputed trailhead. The deputy who stepped out was not a young, eager rookie, fresh from the academy. This was Deputy Miller, a man in his late 50s with a calm, weathered face and the unhurried, observant movements of someone who had seen every kind of rural and suburban dispute imaginable. His gaze swept over the entire scene, the new barrier, me leaning against it, and a fuming Cynthia Porter, who was pacing back and forth on her side of the property line like a caged panther, and his expression gave nothing away. Cynthia immediately launched into her performance the moment he was out of the car, rushing toward him as if he were a liberating soldier. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at my new fence. "Thank you for coming, officer. This man, Daniel Clayton, has illegally blocked off the community walking trail. This is a public right-of-way that our residents have used for years, a key amenity for our neighborhood. He has put up this hideous barrier, threatening us with prosecution. He is creating a public nuisance, and I demand that you force him to tear it down immediately." She presented herself as the voice of the people, the wronged party, the defender of community rights against a selfish, reclusive landowner. Deputy Miller listened to her entire, breathless speech without a single interruption. He just stood there, his thumbs hooked in his duty belt, letting her talk until she had finally run out of steam. When she wound down, breathing heavily from the exertion of her own righteousness, he didn't immediately turn to me as she clearly expected. He didn't ask for my side of the story. Instead, he looked directly at Cynthia Porter, his gaze steady and professional. His first words were not what she, or even I, anticipated. "Good afternoon, Ma'am," he said, his voice a calm, polite baritone. "Before we go any further, may I please see your identification?" The question hit Cynthia with the force of a physical slap. It completely derailed her script, yanking the floor out from under her performance. Her mouth, which had been open to lodge another volley of accusations, hung agape. My ID," she sputtered, her face a mask of pure, uncomprehending confusion. "Why do you need to see my ID? He's the one who's breaking the law." "I need to know who I'm speaking with, ma'am," the deputy replied, his tone perfectly even, giving no ground. "When I respond to a 911 call, my first step is to identify all parties involved. You are the complainant who initiated this official contact. I'll start with you." The subtext was as sharp and clear as a shard of glass. He was establishing a baseline. He was not here as her personal enforcer. He was here as a neutral officer of the law, and his investigation would begin with the person who had summoned him, to establish her standing and her identity. Her complaint was not being taken at face value. Reluctantly, her face a thundercloud of indignation, she fished her driver's license from her designer tennis bag and handed it over. He examined it, nodded, and handed it back. Only then did he turn his gaze to me. "Sir," he said, his tone still perfectly neutral. "This woman claims you're blocking a public right-of-way, and I claim that this is my private property." "Deputy," I replied calmly. "The trail she's referring to has been a private footpath for my family for over 100 years. Her residents have been trespassing for months. I've simply put up a fence on my own land. I'm well within my rights." Cynthia scoffed loudly. "Prove it. You can't just say it's yours. It's a trail, it's been here forever." "Actually," I said, "I can." I turned and walked the short distance back to my cabin. I returned a moment later with a large, heavy, glass-fronted frame under my arm. It was not a modern, laser-printed survey. It was the original plat map of the township from 1920, hand-drawn in beautiful India ink on heavy yellowed linen paper. The property line...
This audio was created with podcastle.ai.
Ink on heavy yellowed linen paper. The property lines were drawn with the care of a master draftsman. The calligraphy of the notations a work of art in itself. My grandfather, the former county record keeper, had professionally archived and framed it years ago. He had left it to me with a simple note tucked in the back. "Truth lasts longer than ink, son. Make sure you always have the original." I presented the map to Deputy Miller. My family, the Claytons, were among the first to settle this lake, I explained. This is the original survey map filed with the county when this area was first subdivided. As you can see, I traced a line with my finger, a line that exactly matched my fenceline. This entire peninsula, Lot 4, including the land 100 feet past this path, has been a single private parcel since 1920. And right here, I pointed to a small, elegant, handwritten notation near the trail. The original county surveyor noted it as a private footpath to the Clayton Overlook. Deputy Miller leaned in, his eyes, accustomed to reading legal documents, scanning the old map with a professional appreciation. He recognized it for what it was, an irrefutable, foundational document. A slow nod of recognition spread across his face. "I've seen the master copy of this down at the county records office," he said, his voice holding a new note of respect. "Haven't seen the original in years. Your grandfather kept impeccable records, Mr. Clayton. He was a good man." He straightened up and turned to face Cynthia, his expression now firm and decisive. "Ma'am," he began, his voice leaving no room for argument, "this document, an official county record, confirms Mr. Clayton's account. This trail is, and always has been, on private property. There is no recorded public right-of-way or easement on this parcel. The developer of your community either made a grievous mistake or deliberately misled the residents in your marketing materials. Either way, your belief that this is a public trail is incorrect." He gestured to my new fence. "Mr. Clayton is legally entitled to restrict access to any part of his own land. This barrier is a lawful fence. Your residents, by ignoring the previous signs and continuing to use this path, have been committing the pantanamense, offense of criminal trespass." The color drained from Cynthia's face. She was utterly defeated, her entire case built on a foundation of assumption and entitlement that had just been demolished by a 100-year-old piece of paper. "Furthermore, ma'am," the deputy continued, his voice a little colder now, "when you call 911 and claim someone is illegally blocking a public right-of-way, and the evidence shows that it is, in fact, private property, that constitutes the filing of a false report. It's a serious offense and a waste of county resources. I am using my discretion today and not citing you for it. I would advise you not to make that mistake again." He looked at her, his gaze unwavering, until she finally dropped her eyes. "Go back to your community and inform your residents that this trail is permanently closed to them. Any person found on Mr. Clayton's property from this point forward will be arrested and charged. Is that understood?" Cynthia Porter, the imperious president of the Sunset Cove HOA, could only manage a single, choked nod. She looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with a hatred that was now utterly powerless. Then she turned and trudged back toward the sterile perfection of her community, a queen returning to a kingdom that had just shrunk significantly. Deputy Miller gave me a respectful nod. "Have a good day, Mr. Clayton." "You too, Deputy." He got back in his cruiser and drove away, leaving me in the sudden profound quiet. The barrier remained. The trail was silent again, save for the whisper of the wind in the pines and the crunch of my own boots on the fallen leaves. The simple, professional act of a wise police officer asking the right person the right question first had unraveled her entire reality. He hadn't asked me to prove my right to my land. He had made her prove her right to stand there and complain in the first place. And she couldn't.